Sacred attention therapy is an approach to liberation. The first liberation is from the conditioned self, psychology of early life. The second liberation is from the realization of the true nature, the fulfillment of oneself as a personality. And the third liberation is the liberation into the life of spirituality and spiritual practice. Sacred attention therapy, or SAT, is a meta-psychology because it embraces not only the physical, emotional, mental and energetic aspects of the human being, but also the spiritual and the transcendental. Therefore, it is uniquely placed to be an applied psychology through counselling and psychotherapy in the 21st century, in which human beings are more complex than ever before.
Welcome to the fourth in a series of online interviews with Richard Harvey. My name is Rob Meager. Today's interview will discuss the lecture Locating Destiny from the Hsüan Hsüeh Discourses. This lecture is available in written form in Bodhi Ocean, an ebook that is available on the books page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. You can listen to the full recording of many of these lectures on the lectures page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. And lastly, you can view many other interviews on the videos page or on our YouTube channel. The URL for our website is www.sacredattentiontherapy.com, and on our website you can click on the YouTube channel icon to view our YouTube channel. And now a little bit of background about Richard Harvey. Richard is a psychospiritual psychotherapist and spiritual teacher. His work emerged out of the human potential movement of the 1970s. He trained with many teachers in humanistic and transpersonal approaches. He's the founder of Sacred Attention Therapy, a radical new approach to inner work for the 21st century that proposes a three-stage model of human awakening. Richard is the author of Your Essential Self and The Flight of Consciousness, among many other publications. He works with people all around the world, and his forthcoming book is entitled Your Sacred Calling. And it's now my pleasure to welcome to the call Richard Harvey.
Hi, Robert.
Hello, nice to be back with you in this space.
Good to be here.
And we have so much potentially to discuss with this lecture, Locating Destiny. Let's see where the conversation goes. Mm-hmm. I want to begin by reminding people that this lecture in particular, it brings together the Taoist story of the sacred tortoise, the Gospel's temptation of Christ, and your teachings on capacity, potential, and destiny. And you open the lecture with the following paragraph, quote, "Today we are talking about locating destiny, locating our destiny. The idea of destiny relies on a sense of oneself. To know yourself, you should know where you are and where you are going. The three questions that represent this journey of clarity and insightfulness are, who am I? How should I live my life? And what do I honor?" End quote. So that's how you open up the lecture. Now these three questions, who am I, how should I live my life, and what do I honor, I have found to be foundational with your three-stage model of human awakening. How did you come to incorporate these three questions into your psychospiritual, psychotherapeutic model? And what's the significance of these three questions in the psychospiritual healing journey?
Gosh, I don't know. I think that these three themes reverberate through the years for me in experience as a human being, because you might say there are these three things going on at any time. You know, there's me, there is this other, which means the world, or the world of apparent beings who I interact with. So it's that which I define as other than myself. And then there is God, consciousness, something else. And these three fields then are all inclusive. So not only do they reverberate through the three stages, but they reverberate through these inquiries, and perhaps the original inquiries as we tend to understand it traditionally in philosophy, to do with the nature of the self, the nature of the world, the apparent world, the nature of the numinous, the deathless, or so on. I mean, in many ways, I'm sure we could write a voluminous paper on these three these three basic themes. Well, what's lovely about it is, although it's all the same ultimately, in the sense that everything is a unity or everything is love, this is a way to come at it in manageable bite-sized pieces, shall we say. And it is, of course, the way in which in our psychology we are bound to interact in relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to skip a question I had about blind faith, and we may come back to it. As I said, there's so much we could potentially cover. But I want to move on to talk about a courageous element of the spiritual journey that you bring up. And I'm going to quote, it's a few paragraphs, so I ask for your patience and those who are watching. Mm-hmm. But you share the following about this courageous element of the spiritual journey. You say, quote, "Living our destiny, embarking on our psychospiritual journey, climbing out toward our destiny, are all hampered by the historical weight of habitual and usually unconscious the historical weight we habitually and usually unconsciously carry. In the life of a human being, the deep, profound challenges of the early years are put on hold universally. Hardly anyone deals adequately with the challenges of dependency. Blame, guilt, punishment, the need for love, the need to be held, wanted, seen, acknowledged, recognized, cherished, and unconditionally accepted comprise a powerful mix of unfinished, unhealed baggage. The developing years of societal and collective restraint, conformism, and rebellion further cement the prison walls of self and other, of fear and frustration. Finally, the adolescent years of despair and anger, creativity and suppression, vision and delusionment confirm the contraction. By the time we have entered our 20s, the mold is set, and we are struggling to stand up straight and bear the indignity of life under the yoke of our burdensome past. To find our center is a courageous move, and yet what else is there to do when the alternative is living a half-life? We may be fortunate and never find out that we have lived a half-life, or we may awaken at the dawning realization that our actions are not anchored in a viable center. Something is missing, and that something is ourselves. Or we may happen upon inner work and meditation comparatively early and get a good head start and come out of the half-sleep of conditioning before we have lived our entire life in hypnotized slumber. Once we set off on the road to our center, there is inevitably a lot of work to do, end quote. So my question for you, Richard, emanating from that piece from the lecture on the courageous element of the spiritual journey, is speaking personally, and I can only speak for myself, my journey of conscious awakening through work with you as well as through my own spiritual practice, it may very well be the most courageous choice I've ever made in my life. Would you say this is consistent with all aspirants' journeys?
Yeah, I would. I'd say we can generalize about this. I mean, Jung himself said in the 50s, maybe the early 60s, I can't remember, there's only one great journey left to man, and that's the inner journey. He said it then, it's certainly true now. I think that we find, those of us who've embarked on it realize that you face your greatest fears, your greatest terrors, your greatest aversions, because it turns out to be inside. And, I wouldn't know what it's like to go to the moon or to climb Everest, but these were the big journeys in Jung's life. And when they were not became commonplace, but then when they were conquered, he was able to say rather pertinently, here's this last great journey left. And the point I'd like to make about it is it needs to become, I suggest we desperately need it to become a norm. At the moment, what it is it's very much, what's the word? It's not the norm. It's rare. It's rare. It's rare for people to start. It's rare for people to persist in any sense through it, and it's certainly extraordinarily rare for anybody to go the distance. Now, that's very sad. It's enormously sad for us in the modern world. Therapy isn't some fringe activity. Let's call it inner work and try and avoid the stigma just now in this exchange. Let's say inner exploration, inner work, but in any case with a therapist or a guide or someone who knows what they're doing. In other words, who can facilitate you doing it yourself, which isn't easy. It takes skill, it takes intuition, it maybe takes some training and so on, but ideally it takes a sensitive person who has some wisdom. Now, if we don't do that, if it doesn't become the norm, and mostly we don't think of it this way. I'm writing books to say, look, we desperately need it to become the norm. And why am I writing books? To say we desperately need mentors in early life who are not parents. We desperately need communal living because not everybody's good at parenting, or for that matter should be. And children need to have more than one father because guess what? We're limited. We're not gods. And as children, that's what we expect. And for a whole host of reasons, we need to change the way in which we conduct ourselves and the cultural norms and expectations and assumptions. And why is that? Let's take one very good reason, and there's many, which are all apparent if you open up a newspaper or look on the news page of your search engine, whatever. All of it's there. But let's just take merely one thing, which is mental disorder, so-called. Mental disorder is rife. When I was a kid, say 50 years ago, we thought there was sane people and then there were these few mental people. We put them in institutions and that was kind of it. Nowadays, we hear that more or less everybody is either subject to mental disorder or someone in their family is going to be there, so you're affected in that way. Nobody's free of it. It's a reality for everybody. In fact, there's so many people with mental disorder, you can't even call it disorder. You've got to call it norm. It's normal. It must be, mustn't it? When most people suffer from some kind of mental disorder. And why is that? Because the shadows and the echoes from the memories of the early life and the unfinished business has now of early childhood, adolescence, infancy, birth trauma and all the rest of it have now reached such an intensity that hardly anybody is free of the knock-on effects of that into their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, and so forth and so forth. And the evidence of this, to me and to therapists I know, people who come to me for supervision, and my own clients, and people I meet outside of this altogether, is the fact that there is a crisis in the 40s or the 50s, somewhere around the middle of life, when the point moves from its relationship to birth, where I'm coming from, and now death, where I'm going to. And in this very vulnerable moment of the thinning of the veils, this pivotal time in life, which may be 45, it may be 55, it depends. Suddenly the rug is pulled from under you. It's depression. It's unexpected anger. It's a crisis of self-confidence. It's unexpected fears and terrors. It's nightmares. It's a sudden attraction to alcohol or to strange adolescent pleasures. Whatever way you look at it, it comes in from left field. It knocks you right off your perch. And this is so prevalent. People thinking they're transparent, people doing their ordinary job in whatever sphere of life they're in, suddenly unable to operate, or people who abandon their life, or because the list is endless. And this crisis, what do we do with it? You should take it for granted and let's understand it. Don't accept it. It's nothing to be accepted about. People's lives are going to crash in the middle. Why? How come? Because we're just not wise and intelligent enough to refer back and say, if you leave a whole bunch of toxic, unfinished business back there in your life, it's going to catch up eventually and bite you. Something's going to happen. It's absolutely essential. I feel this more and more. See the evidence of it. We can all see the evidence of it. That people explore their inner world in great depth as a norm.
Nice intention. But we all need to work more towards just the intention, but the manifestation of it.
Have to do it.
Yeah. You cite a couple of stories about Cheng Tzu in this lecture, resisting the temptation of fame and status in favor of dedication to the divine. One of these stories being the sacred tortoise, and the other being Cheng Tzu's declining the offer to be a chief minister in the king's high court. Now, you wrote the following quote: acerbic, astute, and unambiguous, Cheng Tzu states the case for the spiritual warrior, for the destined adept, for the dedicated devotee of divinity. Nothing at all may stand before the divine, may be compared to the divine, may be spoken in the same breath as the divine, and only steadfast, true, impeccable aspirants will prevail in the world of distraction and temptation. So my question is could Cheng Tzu have devoted his life to the divine in service to government, in reference to the story where he's asked to serve as a chief minister in the king's high court? Could he have devoted his life to the divine in service to government? And secondly, what is it about monastic-oriented lifestyles versus public office that tended to attract the ancient adepts and continue to attract modern-day seekers?
You're right, or rather what I think is maybe behind the question. I mean, of course you can operate in a sense, within the establishment or within the system. It's not as simple as, mammon or God and all of that. However, once we've got through that kind of prejudice, if you will, from 2,000 years old, and that teaching of the Gospels, let's remember that these stories are symbolic. They're making a point beyond themselves. They're not literal stories. They're causing offense to Christians here, I'm no doubt, all the way. But, the Bible is not full of... The point of the Bible is not these literal stories. I mean, Jesus spoke in parables. We talk in terms of symbols here. You can't talk about spirituality in the divine domain without speaking in this way, because it's wordless. There's no words applicable. You just sit in silence. So it's very important to understand that spirituality is conveyed, if it's conveyed at all, through words, symbolically, not literally, not actually. So Literally, yeah, of course he could have, if any of these things ever really happened, but I mean, they almost certainly didn't happen. They were ways of talking about an inner process in which you flout fame and along with that wealth and all this kind of thing. It doesn't mean then that you're not famous or wealthy or, you know, impressive from the outside. It's just that you yourself are not attached to any of these things, whether you were or not. But you're actually concentrating on the core, the essence, the very nub of what's really, really important and significant. And you cleave to that. And of course, only you yourself can know that. And so in a similar way, to follow up with the second part of the question, the monastery is in you. You know, there's never been a convent, a monastery, an ashram, a yogi school, or in a sense, what a church should mean. We've long lost that, I think. But that it's inside you. When you go inside, I mean, memorably, for me, in one of my transpersonal early experiences, which was the Golden Hall, which I wrote about in Your Essential Self. In the Golden Hall, it's very like a church. It's very like an extraordinary ritualistic cathedral, really. But this cathedral turns out to be total. You know, it's as if, you know, this Golden Hall is the whole thing. You know, you can't be out of it. It's like the Buddha's hand. You know, you can't jump off of it. Neither can you be out of it. It's dimensionless. It's formless, and yet it's form, so you can see things as the cathedral, as the church. It's a symbol. It's in your own heart. What's in your heart is the monastery. You only go to the monastery in order to establish its innerness. Having established its innerness, you can then establish its outer innerness. And the outer innerness is breaking down the separation between self, and we'll get back to the beginning here, you know, these three things where we have self and other and God or the divine. There's not really any difference. That's just relational. So when we stop being relational and we become unified, they're all one. So the monastery, this place that Chuang Tzu is sitting on the mud bank in that story, and what he says is, I'd rather be I'd rather be like this tortoise or this
I'd rather be free. I'd rather be free than bound by the walls of the government.
That's right. But he very colourfully says, I'd rather be flapping my tail in the mud like this guy over here, right? Tortoisey thing. And what happens is you go from in the world into the monastery into you, and then be careful, because you're now a mystic, and mystics have their eyes closed. I know this isn't popular. The way isn't the mystic way. You know, we've had that. That's Middle Ages. That's a few thousand years old. It's a very nice and romantic idea. But that's not the end of the spiritual journey. Having your eyes closed and having the temple in your own heart. You then open your eyes and then you see there's no difference between the inner and the outer. You're now no longer inner any more than you're outer, any more than they have any definition or sense to make for you anymore. It is a totality. It's all true. The temple is everywhere now. The ashram is there. The monastery is everywhere. It's a sacred spiritual affair. I mean, this is what we're in. The only way to make sense of this place and to be joyful in this place is to approach it in a sacred spiritual attitude.
Beautiful. I want to end our interview with a quote that you end the lecture with. And you say the following: "We must still ourselves, and we must be ready." As Durkheim was, in reference to Durkheim in the lecture, to receive in the unpredicted, unknown, unexpected moment, speaking of destiny, we must cultivate the quiet and stand in the pond long enough for the mud to settle to the very bottom. so we can see the clear reflection of the sky, the clouds, and the sun. Nothing can prepare us for an encounter with the divine. Yet live your life as if the present were always the occasion of that encounter. How can we describe the meeting with the divine? End quote. And so my question is, the question you asked in the lecture is, how can we describe the meeting with the divine? How can we describe the meeting with destiny? Is it even possible?
Krishnamurti said the description is not the described. So, the experience itself, there is a case for sometimes you don't say anything. We were talking this morning, me and some others, about ritual, for example. Ritual in the sense, not some prescribed ritual which you just go through out of a hymns or a habit or routine or something, but ritual as it comes to us in life. And then you can enter into it, because in the sacred spiritual life of meaning and significance and meeting with the divine, which can happen anytime or is happening all the time, shall we say, that then you are entering into ritual. Ritual isn't, the priest standing in front of the altar in the cathedral and whatnot. It's in your own heart, so it's going on. You're in that ritual the whole time you walk out the door or get in the bath or go clean your teeth or get out of bed. Or this is all sacred spiritual ritual that you're involved in. So when I've conducted ritual in workshops, very often the person comes back transformed. That's just a matter of course. And you don't then ask, you see. You don't go into great detail about what happened. You do in therapy, and you do with past things, and you do with memory and echoes from the past. Of course you do, because that way you need to burn things. It needs to be shared and released. But in something like this, the depth of that sacred, spiritual, present time, healing or meeting or whatever it's been, you don't sort of poke your nose into it, really, not even as the guide and the wise healer or whatever. You just look, you see the results, you praise them, you acknowledge, and that's it. We don't have to talk about everything. We don't have to kind of ground everything into a description. Words, ultimately, what are they? They're symbolic of something that's real. If you're lucky, that's the best we can get out of words. They're symbolic of something which is real, and that which is real cannot be described. It's indescribable. And in that indescribableness of the divine, now you're getting close, because the divine domain isn't in the relative world. It isn't of space and time. It isn't of word or description. So it's very important that we know that we have faith anyway in the reality of that which can't be described, so that sooner or later we can enter, you see. We can go in.
Beautiful way to end our time together, which felt like it just began. A wonderful lecture, Locating Destiny, and we'll continue on with the Hsüan Hsüeh Discourses when we come together the next time, and I look forward to it. Thank you, Richard.
Me too. Thank you. Bye-bye, Robert.
Bye-bye.